Hey everyone, I got a very special guest with me today. We're actually going to be talking about a little different niche in the real estate market. As you've heard me talk about, real estate offers you lots of opportunities to profit and benefit. And today we're going to talk with Chris Seveney, who's going to bring us a brand new subject for the channel, note performing and non-performing notes. So with that, I'll bring Chris on. How you doing today, Chris?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm really excited about this topic because I don't think there's a lot of people that talk about it. And more specifically, I think there's a lot of very busy professionals which sort of gravitate to my channel that only think buy and hold or these other things. And I hopefully in this conversation, we can at least show them that, you know what, maybe note investing, performing or non-performing, is an important thing. So why don't we just open and sort of educate the audience on what it is your company does, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, my company, Seveney Investments, we're a boutique investment firm investing in, like you mentioned, performing and non-performing notes. And most people don't know what a note is, or didn't know you could invest in them. And just like the major banks, like a Wells Fargo or Bank of America, you go to them, you get a mortgage. A lot of those mortgages eventually may get sold off, and they'll get sold off possibly to a hedge fund and then eventually down to investors. And so that's what we invest in. I work full-time in real estate as well. And after 20 years of being in real estate, I didn't even know this niche existed.
Yeah.
And most people don't know it exists because it is a very small niche market. And like you said, a lot of people will do the buy and holds or fix and flips. And
Right.
What we like to talk about is we don't deal with tenants, toilets, or termites when you're acting as a bank.
Yeah.
So now, a few things that people, will typically ask about when you start dealing with things, especially on the non-performing side, when you're starting to get involved in notes. And this was the hardest, I think, grasp for me was, how do you make money off of something that isn't paying you? And a lot of times you get to buy those at a steep discount, so it allows you to work with the borrower, which, that's really the end game is, the individual investors or investment firms like mine, we look towards working with the borrower to keep them in the house and keep them paying.
Got it. So I just want to make sure, just sort of peel back a lot there so the listeners don't sort of. So your company, again, just to be clear, is never, or at least usually, not creating the note originally, right? You're in the secondary market, buying something either at a discount if it's non-performing. I guess always at a discount, but gradations of discount. Is that fair to say?
Correct. There are a few occasions where we may end up having a property gets vacant, and we take it back, and we may create a note as well.
Got it.
But I would say that's probably just a very small component of that thing. It's typically we're buying from the institutions as it makes its way down onto the secondary market. Okay.
And I'm just curious because I don't know the answer. So, if you were investing in 2008, which I started in 2003. So I saw this run up, and then I saw the market roll over, and it really was the mortgage market or the lending market that caused the steep decline. I'm wondering how many steps or layers or whatever you want to call it between a Wall Street firm sort of bucketing these notes into some bigger thing, and then your company buying it. Is it like 6, 7, 8 layers, or I mean, how far does it have to go from this monster thing to an individual house?
Yeah, that's a great question. It also depends on the size of your firm, but
sure.
There's a lot in the news of Goldman Sachs right now buying a lot of these up from Fannie Mae. So I'll start with Fannie Mae will start, and they'll sell them off in billions to Goldman Sachs.
Okay.
And then Goldman Sachs may sell them off into, call it the hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And then there'll be another stack of investors who might buy, 50 to 100 million. And I would say probably table down to $25 to $50 million funds or investments. And then everything under, I'd say probably 25 million is where they use the term, call it cherry pick, where I may get a list of 100 assets and I don't have to buy all of them. I can buy one or I can buy 10.
Got it.
When you're dealing with $100 million, you got to buy all of them. So
yeah, that makes sense. And I never want to assume, so I'll ask. I'm suspect these are all, or at least predominantly, first mortgages?
Yes, I only strictly deal with firsts.
Awesome.
There is a segment of investors who deal with the second mortgages as well. And like you mentioned, this really started, I think, around 2008, this market, because of was such that major meltdown that occurred that everyone's trying to get things off their books. And, like anything with real estate, the markets have started getting better over the last decade. So a decade ago, you may have been able to pick these up for 10 cents on the dollar, where nowadays, the pricing has gotten much more competitive and, can be anywhere from, I'd say 40 to 75 cents on the dollar.
Very cool. Is there any kind of difference, and maybe that's just in the pricing or the discount, between states like California, which just go, NOD, versus some of the states like Florida, I think, that are kind of, stuck in going to judges and all of that. I don't know what they're called, but is there differences in that?
Yeah, there's very big differences. And that's part of when you're doing your due diligence process, knowing your states, because there's states like Florida that has a judicial foreclosure, which is you have to go through the courts. Then there's a state like Texas where you don't have to go through a courts, and you can foreclose in Texas in like 45 days. New York may take you 3 to 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So when you're valuing the asset, you have to take that in consideration, because in Texas, you may spend $2,500 in legal fees and be out of it in 2 months. In New York, you're going to spend $25,000 in legal fees.
Right.
Be 3 to 5 years of your money being tied up.
Got it.
Big difference on the states.
Absolutely. So why don't we try? Because again, this is so new to a lot of people watching this, including myself, I'll admit. Why don't we give a few examples? You don't have to give addresses or anything, but just asset A, asset B, sort of talk about how it comes to you, and then how an investor watching this could potentially benefit. Why don't we just walk through 1 or 2 examples and sort of paint that picture for us, if you don't mind?
Yep. So they call them tapes, which is a spreadsheet of assets.
Okay.
And typically on that, there's tons of data on it. The major information that you typically look for is, what was the monthly payment? How far are they behind? What's the balance, the principal balance on it? And the key with first is knowing what the property value is worth, because that's very important, because if you ever want to bid on the lower of the balance or the value, because if in any instance you ever have to take that property back, then you want to have some equity in that stake.
Sure.
So typically you'll get that, and the sellers typically will put them out to a group of people and give you about a week's time frame.
Oh, wow.
For example, I've got a tape right now that bids are due today, and I'll go through and do my due diligence, looking everything up, and go through my protocols that I do, and run numbers through a calculator, just like a fix and flipper, buy and hold guy. Just a different calculations. And then it's similar to once you put your bid in, similar to like putting a bid in a house. It's indicative, because you haven't seen any of the files of the history or the pay history, or you don't know the person's name or what their credit history is like.
Oh, wow.
You don't know the condition of the house.
Okay.
So typically you won't spend money when you're doing the bidding phase, and that's kind of an understood.
Okay.
So you can do this anywhere. I mean, I could sit on a beach literally and put a bid in, and then if you're, and then they'll come back and typically you'll counter. But if the bid gets accepted, that's when, the clock starts. So just like, you put an offer in on a house, you don't spend money putting an offer in on a house when you're buying it. That's the best example I can use. Then once you do, it's like, okay, now I get the home inspection. Now we're not allowed to do a home inspection because someone's typically living in the house.
Right.
And you're the bank. So you're not, and that's one of the hardest things you're not actually buying the house, you're buying the mortgage. And it takes people to think about that a little bit sometimes, who, like, what am I buying? Because people think they're buying the house, but you're really not.
No, you're buying a position. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you'll send a realtor by the property to take pictures of it and kind of run a CMA, comparative market analysis, to give you an idea. Hey, here's its worth. Typically you'll, look at it as if the person hasn't been, if they're behind on payments, typically they're not going to have brand new kitchen, bathroom, and things like that. So kind of got to discount it. Then the other big thing to look at is you run a title report.
Sure.
Because there's things like back taxes that could be due, sewer city liens, and also make sure you're actually buying a first mortgage. I've had some in the past where they've had so many title problems, or IRS liens or other types of liens on them.
Talk about jumping the line. IRS liens. There you go.
Yeah. So it's, very important that you do check the title, and not only check it, but what I do is I order the title report. I send it off to an attorney in that state, because each state is very different on their laws and how things are done. So I have an attorney in every state, take a look at that and kind of give me the thumbs up, or, hey, here are the problems and here's what you would need to rectify.
Very cool. So do me a favor. So you said you got the tape. I believe I heard you say you had a week to, so let's just say the tape had 100. You're bidding on, you can bid on, 17 of the 100. You don't have to bid on all 100, correct? I heard that correct?
Yep.
Okay,
correct.
Great. So let's assume you bid on 20 for easy math. Let's assume they accept 10 of your bids. How much time do you have to start? When does the clock start and when does it stop for your due diligence? Is it another week, 30 days? What is that?
It's typically, they will send you a bunch of files called the collateral, which is a lot of the backup documents you're looking for. 2 weeks. Typically, they want that deal funded in 2 weeks.
And you have every right to go, hey, I found X either on the title or half the house is burned down or whatever. You could eject from any of them you want within that 2 week window. No harm, no foul.
Correct. As long as it's a legitimate reason of why. But I've seen ones where, the house wasn't even there. The house had burned down.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen, one looked like there was a hole in the side of the house. I've, had ones where the back taxes were $30,000 that, you couldn't look it up online for the taxes. So, but it's usually a 2 weeks. So it's pretty hectic process. And
I can only imagine. Yeah. It takes, and you're coordinating. Well, you've already mentioned, right? You're coordinating realtors, likely out of state. You're coordinating attorneys, likely out of state. Yeah. And you've got a 10 business day turnaround. So that's
so it takes usually 3 to 5 days to get the title report. So by the time you get that, then, typically, you get your attorney on board early saying, hey, I'm going to be sending this to you so he knows. And typically, a lot of people will use the same attorneys in the same states that specialize in this. So it's not just some attorney who's never looked at this before and like, what am I doing? There's attorneys that deal with this a lot. So when they get that information, they can turn it around in a day.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So let's pretend somebody watching this is a potential investor. So clearly you have your processes wired. You're doing your homework. You're doing your due diligence.
Yep.
Let's just say the tape gave you a house at 100. I'm just going to make stuff up now. You're going to buy it at a discount, say 50, just for easy math.
Yep.
How does an investor partner with you or whatever you want to call it, JV or private or whatever? How do they make their sliver of that? How does that work?
Yeah, without, I'll say, making sure I'm not offering and breaking any SEC laws.
No, yeah, just
hypothetically, hypothetically, say there was a note that the house was worth, 100 and they owed 100 and they weren't paying. Bought it for 50. Typically, the investment will add, probably a 20% buffer for legal fees and things like that as part of the investment deal.
Sure. Okay.
Depending on how how things go, but then it's once the process starts when you buy that note, you use a third-party servicing company licensed in that state. They'll do the reach out, try and work everything out, and it's about a 12 to 18 month process on average.
Wow.
For each note. Some can be quicker, so it really depends on
the state,
the state and everything. But sometimes you may, because again, you're buying this thing at 50. Say the payment was, again, easy numbers, $1,000.
Exactly.
You could go to the person and say, hey, look, I'm going to go back and change it to $800 a month. And knock $200 off, and all of a sudden you're collecting 10 grand a year on the $50,000 investment. Hey, there's a 20% return. And then the kicker on that is after they've been paying for 12 consecutive months, then you can turn around and sell it as a performing note. And that's the key. Non-performing, say you buy it at 50, performing, you can sell it for around 80 cents on the dollar. So when you do the math, after a year, you collected, again, rough numbers, 10,000, and it'll be a year and a half because it takes time and everything. But simple numbers, you're turning around and selling that 100,000 for 80,000. So all of a sudden, you've just made your 10 plus 30. You just made $40,000 100,000 hypothetically in a
Yeah,
perfect situation. So that's a off the charts return when those happen.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to make sure I sort of have a chalkboard in my head. So what I see happening is, let's just pretend it's me, right? I'm accredited and all that nonsense.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm going to give you 50.
Engineer me being too technical.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to give you $50,000. I'm likely not going to see an immediate return on that because there's this whole workout process going on that could take 6 to 18 months. Let's just assume it happens and we go from 1,000 to 800. I then hold that paying note, which let's say is a year from now. Now I get a year of payments, which is $9,600 or 10 grand.
Yep.
Then I could sell it. So I'm in this thing for about 2.5 years. I've collected 10 grand, and then I have the ability to sell a performing note on the market for 80 grand, making the delta, which is 30. Hence, over 2.5 years, I've taken 50 grand, turned it into 90 grand, right? 40 plus 50. Do I have that right?
Yep. The one thing I say is it's not the 2.5. You could probably do it in a year and a half because it takes about 6. Say if it took 6 months to get.
Oh, I got you.
And then after 12 months, so 18, but let's say 2 years to keep things simple.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I double counted. You're right.
Yep.
Okay, so it's 6 months to kind of work out, then a year, boom, 18 months, 24 months, somewhere there.
Yeah.
Now I'm with you. That's pretty cool.
And,
all right.
And typically profits get split.
Of course.
Typically the sponsor, the person will put in the money, the company will work out the deal and then the profits get split. So.
Yeah, and then that would be what you would work out with your accredited investors and all of that. So, yeah, I got you. Very, very cool. All right, so this sounds really, really complicated. Sounds like a niche that not many people are in. So if you don't mind, sort of rewind the clock for me. And how did you sort of uncover this niche? What were you doing before this? You've been in real estate a long time. Sort of paint the vision that was your aha moment that you needed to go after this, Chris.
Yeah, so my aha moment was a little over 3 years ago. Actually, let me step back even further. 5 years ago, my wife and I, we built our single family home. Okay. Again, being in real estate construction, I'm in the Washington, D.C. market. We built our primary residence. And then after we built that, we had a little bit of equity. So we used some of that and started buying some rentals. Yep. And what we were doing is we were buying and holds. And we buy them needing work. We'd go in, we'd fix them. And then what we do after we fix, they'd have a higher appraisal. We'd refinance to get our money out of the deal. Yep. So we'd be in these with nothing and they'd be cash flow and positive. So
not a bad deal.
No, it's not a bad deal. But having also, the wife, 2 little kids.
Yeah.
I'm in Washington, D.C., which is one of the most expensive and competitive markets in the country.
Amen. Yeah.
It's, to find time, because again, my wife and I both work full time and the kids on the weekends, there just wasn't. I mean, it was impossible to do anything and scale it. So it was really challenging. So I was on a website, Bigger Pockets, which is, you may have heard of and stuff. And I found this guy, Scott Carson out of Texas. He's got a company called We Close Notes, and he does a lot of training. And he's got a big online presence. And he's considered one of the, I'll use the term guru, but I know a lot of people don't like that phrase. But
experienced investors.
Yes, he's a very experienced investor. And he trains people and then continues to work with them, which is very beneficial. And so it took me about 6 months before I could pull the trigger because it's such a new niche and you don't know what you don't know. And then again, I'm an engineer. So the analysis paralysis kicked in and it just, I couldn't pull the trigger on anything. And then after taking a second training with Scott, I finally decided, okay, time to pull the trigger.
Right.
So I pulled the trigger on a few assets that I did. And then after working those out for a few months and kind of really get my feet wet, and it truly is this business. I use the term like hitting a golf ball. You can watch 1,000 videos of how to hit a golf ball, but until you step up there and swing the club and hit it, it's a completely different feeling.
Amen.
Yeah, it's like note investing. I mean, or it's like rehabbing a house, the same thing. You can read a book, but how helpful is reading a book and rehabbing a house? Because there's so many things that can go wrong. So after that, I bought a few, started working those out, then bought, a few more after that and really started to get comfortable and really went from being kind of just a single investor to scaling a business. And once I started doing some marketing and some other things and got comfortable, that's when I started reaching out to, working with some local people, doing some webinars and having some investors come in the door and stuff like that. And over the last year, I've pulled in a little over 60 notes, that I acquired. And so it's, a good amount, about 5 per month is what I try and target. Again, because also working full time as well, it's got that challenge. And that's also kind of the other reason of being in this business is literally from 9 to 11 o'clock at night, I can go through that tape of notes. I can send emails to my attorneys. You don't have, I can have somebody on Craigslist go drive by a property. It's not something that I have to physically be at or be somewhere to do. It's completely, remote and online is where you can do everything.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like how you sort of frame that, the industry now or whatever kids these days are calling that your side hustle. I think having something that you could do mornings or evenings and still be very good at your day job, if you will, is awesome, right? When you're flipping or you're wholesaling or any of those things in mass, if you're doing 5 flips or 5 wholesale deals a month, it's a full-time job, right? It's going to cut into your daytime because you got to deal with people when they're awake. But when you're doing notes aren't people, right? They don't have pulses. Right? You can do that work at 11 o'clock at night, at 2 a.m., just doesn't matter. So I love how you sort of work that out and you found something that fits your need, meaning time. You can set up your process and procedures and grow with this thing. So I think that's a genius move.
Yeah, and it's also a slower business in the sense of like when you're doing rehab, you'll get a call from the electrician. What do you want to do? You need to answer them now because there's 10 guys being held up on that.
Yeah.
In note investing, there's the reach out and, it's, people, if they're behind on a payments, how often are they answering their phone and how, it's not a process. It's like watching grass grow, honestly. It's not something where you expect a daily response. It's more of a weekly to monthly type of process of trying to gain some momentum, not a daily, like on a rehab.
Got it. I think that's a great point. So there are many people out there that don't have the time, want to get their money working for them. Now with the stock market doing what it's doing, probably pulled stuff out. So this is just another avenue. I'm really happy to have you on this interview. So do me a favor. Let's paint so you sort of told us where you are, where you started. Where do you see this thing going? You're doing 5 a month now. Where do you see this going in 3 to 5 years? Still doing 5 a month, or do you have bigger visions than that?
Definitely have bigger visions, but I also love my full-time job and enjoy that. So I have no aspirations at this time of leaving my full-time job.
Very cool.
Recently, I have partnered with another note investor who does do this full-time. And in 3 to 5 years, some of our goals are to expand it to start a fund, a 506c accredited fund. So that allows us also to kind of move that step up the ladder, like I talked about earlier, where it started from Fannie Mae down, try and, again, move one
up step. There you go.
Because as you move up, it's like anything. You're moving up the price chain so you can get things at a little better discount as well.
That makes sense.
And also, really, part of it is expanding my brand over the next 3 to 5 years. And we just started a podcast and doing some marketing and really just sharing our stories and looking to be a mentor to other investors who are getting started. I come from a family where my father was a teacher and spent his whole career in the school system. So having, been that ingrained in me, it's something that I enjoy to also mentor others. I'm not looking to start training programs or anything like that, but I like to take people under my wing and basically kind of show them what I have learned to try and make them successful as well. Yeah,
I've checked out your site, looked at a couple of podcasts before this interview, and I could see that in you, right? It was kind of natural that this guy's, going to be a mentor, trainer. He's got some teacher in him for sure. So why don't we kind of wrap this up? And, the next section is for you. How, share whatever you want. Talk about your podcast, talk about your website, how people can get a hold of you if they want to ask more questions. Go for it.
Yeah, so I am excited because we literally just launched our podcast. It's called the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast, and kind of plays the pun because a deed is also a type of mortgage, but also really about doing good deeds because, like we talked about, briefly beforehand, most people think of, I'll say, mortgage lenders as the big banks who, if you're behind, it's impossible to get in touch with. And, basically you have to make all those payments back up. And, if you try to do a short sale, it's like a 12 to 18 month process. There's so much red tape. And as it funnels its way down to the investors and, when you can pick up things at a discount, it gives you so much more flexibility. And we wanted to just share our stories on the podcast of how we're helping homeowners and keeping them in their homes, because that's our goal. Because that example we talked about earlier, where over that 2-year process, if you had to turn around and foreclose on that deal, you're probably, just step back for a second, that $100,000, you're in it for 50, you probably spent $10,000 in legal fees, or, so use rough numbers, but you're in it for 60. Then the house probably, when you go to sell it as an REO, probably would sell for maybe $90,000. Plus you get realtor fees, the taxes, and all the carrying costs and stuff. Your margins get so much slimmer. So
very tight.
Beneficial from a economical standpoint and a social impact standpoint of trying to keep the people in the house. And we try and start to use a term like being an impact investor, because investing a lot in the Midwest too, where some of the house pricing is lesser expensive, and working with those people is an area we focused on as well. And for people who want to reach out to me, my website is seveneyinvestments.com. It's actually the number 7, the letter E, then the word investments.com. You can email me at chris@seveneyinvestments.com. And like I said, and our podcast is live right now. You can check it out on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and that's the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. And we have a website for that we just got up and running as well.
Very cool, Chris. I think you're going to do great things. And I don't know if you watched my stuff. I actually think the market's rolling over. You saw the yield curve go negative. So I think putting in your procedures and processes now is great timing, because I could see probably this time next year where that tape you're getting is longer, and probably having a fun going one rung up would be a good thing. So I just want to say I appreciate your time. You've brought something new to myself and to the my YouTube channel. So I really appreciate your time today, Chris. Thank you very much.
No problem. And thank you for having me on. It's been a great opportunity, and look forward to watching more of what you got.
You got it. Thanks, buddy. Hold on.
Thank you.